Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Love series.
Hmm.
Today we're diving into a case that I think is really going to make you question the whole peaceful village life thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you imagine a small village in Haryana, India, and everyone knows each other, things are peaceful,
Right.
but underneath that surface, there's this simmering feud going on and eventually just boils over into this brutal act of vengeance. It really shatters the peace and leaves the whole community trying to deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to 2018. Our victim, Rajiv Malik. He's a 34-year-old farmer, a well-respected guy, family man.
Yeah.
And he was in this really bitter land dispute with Suresh Kumar. Now, Suresh was his neighbor. They'd known each other for years.
Oh, wow.
And this wasn't just like a disagreement. This feud had been going on for generations.
Oh, my gosh.
And the farmland itself, it represented way more than just money,
Oh, absolutely. I think what's so fascinating and tragic about this case is how it just totally blows apart that idea we have of, like harmonious village life.
Right.
Because land in so many rural communities, it's not just about who owns it. It's tied up with family legacy and, your social standing in the community, like where you belong.
Your roots.
Exactly. And it goes back generations, like you said. So these disputes, they get so personal.
Right.
They carry all that weight of history with them. And it's like all these intense emotions that can be so hard to control.
It's like the land itself becomes this like symbol of all those deeper issues.
Yeah.
And in this case with Rajiv and Suresh, this thing had been festering for years. We're talking like actual clashes.
Wow.
They tried to get the village elders to mediate it. It didn't work. And there were constant threats going back and forth. It was just like this cycle of resentment.
Basically, like they were stuck.
Yeah, they couldn't find a way out.
Absolutely. And that's where I think it gets really complicated trying to resolve something like that. Because, in these tight-knit communities, people don't want to involve outsiders.
They want to handle it themselves.
Right. Like it'll just work itself out. Or they're afraid of what'll happen if they take sides.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So you get this like dangerous silence and the resentment just keeps building and building until something that seems small just sets off this horrible chain of events.
So in this case,
Yeah.
was that trigger the legal battle when Rajiv won the land in court?
Yeah, exactly. You can imagine how Suresh felt. Totally wrong. Like the system had completely failed him.
Right.
And that perceived injustice, it just added fuel to the fire, like this desire for revenge.
Yeah.
It really warped his sense of what was right and wrong.
So you're saying he was basically thinking, I deserve this land. It's been taken from me.
Yeah, it's like, this is my family's legacy. I've been robbed. Now, I'm not saying what Suresh did was okay.
Right.
But you have to try to understand the emotions behind it.
It's just heartbreaking that something so fundamental as a sense of justice could lead to something so awful.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, were there any signs? Could anybody have stepped in and stopped this from happening?
That's the question that comes up again and again in cases like this, Because everybody knew about Suresh's threats to hurt Rajiv.
They did.
Yeah, but they just brushed them off like he was just angry or drunk. Yeah. But it shows you how important it is to be able to recognize when threats are getting worse.
Yeah.
And to see that the potential for violence is real.
It's almost like they got so used to the feud that they couldn't see the danger anymore.
Yeah, it was like a collective failure.
They didn't see how bad things could get.
Exactly. And it's not about pointing fingers. It's about understanding what leads to these kinds of tragedies.
Right.
So in this case, it was a mix of that deep resentment, that feeling of injustice, and the community not wanting to get involved.
Like it all came together.
It created like a perfect storm, and nobody saw it coming until it was too late. And then it happened. You know what I mean? It was July 15th, 2018. Rajiv was walking home from his fields, and he was ambushed.
Oh, gosh.
Suresh and some other guys, they were waiting for him, and they attacked. The brutality of it, even people who knew about the feud were shocked. It was
Bye-bye.
it wasn't just about stopping him. It
Right,
was
right.
about making him pay.
Right.
Sending a message.
Oh, man. When you think about the level of planning
Right.
and the fact that they got other people involved.
It wasn't just like a spur-of-the-moment thing.
No way.
It was planned out.
Yeah.
Years of anger building up.
To think that rage could drive someone to that.
Well, that's what makes it different from like a crime of passion.
How so?
They had time to think about it, to think about what would happen. But they still did it.
Yeah.
They were so focused on revenge.
It's hard to wrap your head around that.
I know.
Like, what goes on in someone's mind when they get to that point? So obsessed with getting revenge.
It's complicated. A lot of times they go through this thing called cognitive distortion. It's like they're so fixated on what they see as this injustice that they block out anything that doesn't fit their story.
So they create their own reality.
Exactly.
Wow.
And their thinking gets all rigid. They're super emotional. And everything they do becomes impulsive. It's all about revenge.
So you're saying Suresh actually thought he was in the right?
In a way, yeah. He'd convinced himself that he was the victim.
That's crazy.
And that's important to understand. We think of revenge as like cold and calculated.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it comes from this deep sense of justice, even if it's twisted, you know.
It just makes it all so much more tragic.
Yeah.
Because no one wins.
Oh.
Rajiv lost his life, his family's devastated, and Suresh, he destroyed his own life too.
Exactly. So then there's the legal side of things. The police did a thorough investigation.
Good.
They got witnesses, they looked at all the evidence, and pretty quickly, they had their motive.
Revenge.
Yep, so they arrested Suresh and the other guys.
I bet that trial brought up a lot of tension in the village.
Oh, absolutely. It was more than just a trial. It was like this public event. The whole community had to face what had happened.
Yeah.
That silence that had let the feud go on. It was broken. People had to choose sides. They had to think about what they believed about justice. And they had to deal with the fact that their inaction had led to this awful outcome.
So what did Suresh's lawyers do? Did they try to say it was a crime of passion?
Yeah, they tried to make him look like a guy who had just snapped. Like he was so overwhelmed by grief and anger that he couldn't control himself.
Because of the land dispute.
Right. And because he thought the court was unfair.
But they planned it out. And they had help.
Right.
Doesn't seem like a very strong defense.
Well, the jury didn't buy it.
I'm not surprised.
The prosecution did a good job. They showed how they'd planned everything, how they got those other guys involved, how brutal the attack was.
Right.
They proved it wasn't just a bad decision.
It was revenge.
Exactly.
So justice was served.
Well, legally, yeah. Suresh and the others were convicted of murder, and they got life in prison.
But you said before that justice is complicated in a case like this.
Yeah, because even though there's a verdict, it doesn't take away the pain or heal the community.
Right.
Rajiv's family, they lost someone they loved. And Suresh's family, they have to live with what he did.
It's just sad all around.
It is. And the village is still divided, still haunted by what happened.
Yeah, it really shows you that even when there's justice, doesn't mean everything's okay. The damage is done, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And cases like this, they make us think about the bigger picture.
What do you mean?
Like, what could have been done to stop it from happening? How can we deal with these kinds of conflicts before they turn violent?
Those are big questions.
They are.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in the legal stuff, the trial, the verdict. But what really gets to me is the human cost. Like Rajiv, a good man who was loved by his family and his community. He lost his life because of a fight that didn't have to end this way.
Right.
And Suresh, he let his rage take over. And he ended up ruining his own life.
It's a terrible cycle of pain, and it shows how important it is to have ways to resolve these conflicts.
Especially in rural communities.
Yeah.
Where land disputes are so common.
Exactly. What if Rajiv and Suresh had been able to talk things out early on, you know, before it got out of hand? Maybe they could found a way to reconcile.
It's easy to say that now, though.
Of course. But that's why we have to learn from these cases.
Right.
If we understand what led to the violence, maybe we can see the warning signs next time and prevent it from happening again.
So what can we do? How can we create a culture of peace? Stop these cycles of violence?
It's going to take all of us working together.
What do you mean?
We have to improve the ways we resolve conflicts.
Okay.
At every level.
Yeah.
Families, communities, the legal system. Things like mediation and arbitration. Those can be really effective.
So people can work things out before they get violent?
Right.
But what about situations where it's already escalated?
Yeah.
Where people are just stuck in that anger and resentment?
That's where mental health resources come in. And community outreach.
Okay.
We need to create safe spaces.
Safe spaces.
Yeah, places where people can express their anger without resorting to violence.
Right.
And they need access to mental health professionals.
So they can learn to cope.
Exactly. Process their trauma, find healthy ways to deal with their problems.
So it sounds like we need a lot of people involved. Community leaders, educators, law enforcement, mental health professionals.
Yeah. It's about building a culture that values communication, empathy, peaceful solutions.
This has been really eye-opening. It's easy to focus on the crime itself, but this deep dive has shown us the human side of it, all the factors that contribute to these tragedies.
Absolutely. And in the end, we can't forget the victims. People like Rajiv whose lives were cut short by senseless violence if we learn from their stories, if we understand what causes conflict, and if we work together to build a more peaceful world, then we can honor their memory and try to prevent this from happening again.
I couldn't agree more. This has been a tough conversation, but an important one. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
It was my pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Haryana Village Revenge Murder. We hope this episode has made you think, and maybe even inspired you to promote peace and understanding in your own communities.
Remember, even small acts of kindness and empathy can make a difference.
And don't forget to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle and our YouTube channel for more deep dives into the dark side of human nature. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and as always, stay vigilant.